few weeks ago, my friends and I decided to go on a camping trip to celebrate the end of the semester, as we have done for the past few years. This time, my buddy Alex suggested that we try a new campsite to mix things up. He said that he'd found a good one that not a lot of people frequent, so there was a good chance we'd have the place to ourselves. All of us were excited to see this new site. There was supposedly even a lake not too far away. As soon as finals finished, we hauled our stuff into the van and took off. The drive was about 4 hours, but the extra time was well worth it once we got to the campgrounds. Alex was right. There was nobody here. Plus, William brought some weed along, so this was shaping out to be a great trip. The parking lot was at the bottom of a large hill. The grounds were in a large and dense forest, and it looked like there were some great hiking trails. I told Alex and William that we'd have to come back here again, and they both agreed. It was a solid 45 minutes before we reached Alex's totally dope campsite at the top of the hill. It was actually pretty great, even if it was a difficult trek through the forest to get here. There was a nice clearing and a pretty good view of some hiking trails. Plus, it was early enough in the summer that the weather wasn't too hot. We set up our tent and went out to get wood for a campfire. It was getting late and we were getting pretty tired already, so Alex promised to show us the lake the next day. The goddamn mosquitoes are everywhere. Alex smacked his shoulder. I can't believe I forgot the bug spray. This is where it gets fuzzy. Maybe it was the pot. It could be the pot. But I swear to God, there was something watching us. Beyond the light of the fire, I could see a dark outline of something standing in the trees. It was too far away to make out much detail, so I wasn't sure if it was a person or an animal. I pointed it out to William and Alex, but they didn't see anything. As the night went on, I noticed that thing was still there, and it hadn't moved. It was really just starting to freak me out. I decided to go tell whoever or whatever this was to fuck off. When I got up and made my way into the trees, the figure was gone. But I definitely heard something walking around. I heard twigs snapping under its feet with each step. Finally, I found it. It was close enough to make out some details this time. Paralyzed with fear, I froze as soon as I saw the creature in front of me. It definitely wasn't human. At first glance, it could have been a deer or some other animal. But as I looked again, its glowing eyes and long limbs that came to the sharp points of razor-like claws were all that I could focus on. I used to camp a lot as a kid, and I was pretty into it for a long time. But I couldn't identify this creature, not even in the slightest. Before I could get a word out, the creature sprinted towards me, pulling itself forward for a few steps before lurching at me on its hind legs. Its claws were outstretched. I turned and ran the other way. I immediately hooked my foot under a log and smacked hard onto the ground. The creature's skeletal hands came within inches of my throat, and everything went black. I woke up the next morning in my sleeping bag. Naturally, my friends didn't believe my story, and though I never forgot about it, I was able to move the occurrence to the back of my mind and just chalk it up to the drugs. After all, when I said it out loud, it did seem ridiculous. But it still shook me. And I wouldn't be surprised if I saw that creature in my nightmares for the rest of my life. The sun was just beginning to set when Alex brought us to the lake. The golden rays reflecting off the gentle water made me feel totally and completely relaxed. As we swam out to the middle of the body of water, I could feel the remaining fear of the creature from the previous night just fade away. Maybe there wasn't anything to worry about. Plus, I'd have a great campfire story for next year. After about 30 minutes in the water, Alex, William, and I began to make our way toward the shore. To my right, water sprayed into my face as Alex splashed around next to me. "Hey man, knock it off." He was on the swim team, so I thought he was just dicking around. But when I turned around to look at him, I saw that he was thrashing around just under the surface, desperately trying to get above the water. It looked like he was drowning. Something's down there. Alex violently broke the surface of the lake, flailing his arms and gasping for air. Not a second after he said those words, he was yanked down sharply. Mid-breath, his words were garbled by the water rushing into his lungs. William and I both dove down looking for Alex, but we couldn't find him. It was too dark to see anything. It was as if Alex had vanished. "What the fuck was that?" I sputtered. I can only think about the creature I saw the night before. Could it swim? What else was out here? All the color had drained from William's body as he raised a shaking hand, pointing at a dark figure on the shore. Its bright eyes stared into my core as it stood there on its hind legs, its claws sticking out of Alex's chest after dragging him from the lake. Blood ran in long trails down my best friend's torso. I almost threw up right there. There was just no logical way that thing could have dragged a 150-pound star swimmer out from the middle of the lake and down onto the shore within 45 seconds. William and I stayed where we were, treading water as the monster stared us down. There was no way we could escape. Slowly, the creature let go of Alex and stood straight up. God, it had to be 7 or 8 feet tall. Its head leaned forward, eyes unblinking, glowing dimly in the darkness. William and I were stuck where we were. Fear was electrifying every nerve as we knew that all we could do was wait. We were going to die in that lake, ripped apart and dragged under the water. The creature began to circle the lake. It was hunting us. I was sure of it. William and I spun slowly as it moved towards us, not wanting to take our eyes off it for a second. A splash echoed out at the far end of the water as the creature dove towards us. William and I swam faster than anyone should have been able to do. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, and miraculously, I found myself dragging my body onto the sand and pulling myself to my feet. I ran to the campsite and hurriedly grabbed Alex's bag, hoping the car keys were inside. Fear pushed me through the trees as I sprinted past the tent and on the way to the bottom of the hill. William was right behind me until I heard him cry out in pain before smacking into the dirt. Oh shit. I felt like I was running forever. My lungs burned and my throat was raw with each breath. Though it was out of my control, my legs were forced to slow down due to exhaustion. Every so often, the snapping of the twigs and pounding footsteps behind me propelled me down the hill. Finally, I reached the car. I dumped the contents of the backpack onto the pavement, scooping up the keys and his cell phone. My trembling fingers fumbled the keys before I was able to cram them into the ignition and floor it out of there. Weeks have passed since that camping trip, and I still can't process what happened. As soon as I was far enough from the campsite, I used Alex's phone to call the police and report an animal attack. A group of officers went to the campgrounds, where they found the mutilated bodies of Alex and William. It was a bear, they told me. This is the first time I've told anyone about the creature I saw. Part of me doesn't want to admit that it really happened, but I wasn't high that night in the lake, and I wasn't hallucinating. I'm still afraid that thing will find me again. I don't go camping anymore.
The Forest of Three. The Forest of Three. That is what it's called. Nobody knows who named it, or when. In fact, this secluded area is not labeled on maps. It has no official name, only the name given to it by the townsfolk who live on its edge. The Forest of Three. Perhaps it is named after the 3 tall redwoods that grow in its heart. 3 towering giants lifted their heads far above the tree line. They stand in a circle with overgrown branches extended into each other's foliage, as if linking arms. When the wind howls, one can see them sway. Their powerful roots supply the giant forces needed to prevent them from falling. Viewed from the correct angle, it could appear as if they are attempting to dance, to uproot themselves and skip in a circle with hands joined. The 3 redwoods have been left untouched for decades. Although the ancient, well-seasoned wood would surely be profitable for the town's lumber industry, not a single person would ever suggest cutting them down. The redwoods are viewed by the townsfolk as guardians of the forest, as protectors of the town. And a very small town it is. How many inhabitants are there? Nobody knows the exact count, for such details are of little concern. But it could not be more than a few hundred. During the daylight hours, the streets are occasionally filled with lovely sounds of children playing, running, skipping, shouting, and all other manner of things that children are prone to do. However, the town itself is a rather boring place, and not the preferred playground of children. After all, the town sits next to a large forest. What better playground could a child ask for? Thousands of trees to climb, rocks to overturn, creatures and insects to be examined. A child could spend every day exploring the vast expanse of green and never happened upon the same tree twice. Yes, the forest is a perfect place for children. A place for them to explore, to imagine, to learn. The children love the forest greatly. They even sing a nursery rhyme about it, skipping in circles with hands joined. Children will chant, come play in the forest of three, you and I with thee. Oh, such fun we have in store, lurking there forevermore. Where this rhyme comes from, nobody knows. It is possible that the children themselves wrote it, yet upon examination, this theory seems implausible. Forevermore? Thee? Hardly words that a child would understand, let alone include in a song. No, this rhyme speaks of something old, something archaic, something beyond the understanding of children. For many years, life was peaceful in the small town. Nothing noteworthy occurred. There was no newspaper because there was never any news. A simple lumber town with a simple lumber industry, populated by simple people. Everything was as it should be. Nothing was out of place. Then, a child disappears. How long ago was this? Few remember the exact year. Several decades ago, at least. A child who was only concerned in life with sweets and playtime simply vanished. A town meeting was called. One of the other children claimed that they had seen the missing child earlier that day, that the missing child had gone into the forest to play, as usual, and had not come back. A search party was immediately organized and sent into the forest. They searched for hours, until the falling darkness did not permit them to search any longer. We'll search again at first light. Everything will be fine. It's probably just a game. Don't worry so much. The townfolk comforted the children's terrified parents. As soon as the first rays of sunlight crept through the trees, the search party was out again. They covered miles and miles, hardly stopping for rest or food. Yet there was no trace of the missing child. Each day they searched. Each day they came back with sore feet, hungry bellies, and no child. Hope was still there, but it was quickly fading. Each day the search party came back sooner and sooner. Each day they spent less and less time looking for the missing child before heading back. Eventually, the searches ceased entirely. If one was to examine the town at that time, at first glance it would appear just as it was before. Men chopped wood, stores had good business, school was in session, children still played in the streets and in the forest. Of course, the family and friends of the missing child grieved. But nothing would seem out of the ordinary at first glance. Look closer, and you would see it. The children. They played, they danced, they sang their nursery rhyme. Yet, there was something odd about their games. As they skipped in circles, armed together, chanting their favorite tune, there was a distinct gap where the two children should have been holding hands. Instead, held each other's arms to the side, creating a gap in the circle. A gap that seemed just large enough to make room for one more child. During the rainy season, the children often had to play inside. The school had an ample supply of checkerboards, which were excellent at keeping the children's minds engaged. If one looked closely at the children's playing checkers, you would notice a single lonely child. Whereas all the other children and partners to play checkers with, this child was on their own. Nevertheless, they seemed to be having a good time, making moves for both sides of the board, and even becoming angry when they lost to their imaginary partner. Life in the town continued. The memory of the missing child faded with each year, until the other children scarcely remembered them. Soon, The children matured and had children of their own. The unfortunate unsolved mystery of the child had went missing was slowly forgotten. Until a second child vanished. The adults who remembered the original disappearance were disturbed. The disappearance of another child brought back painful memories. Many of them have been children themselves when the first child went missing, although they remembered very little about that child. Again, a town meeting was called. During the meeting, it surfaced that the child was last seen heading into the forest, eager to play, and again, a search party was formed. This search party fared no better than the one 15 years earlier, although the forest was searched each day for hours, with many miles of land being covered. Not a single trace of the child was ever found. Again, the search party was disbanded, leaving the family to grieve their loss. After a while, the town seemed to return to normal. Daily life resumed its normal course, just as it had so many years before. Yet if you looked closely at the children, you would notice the same curiosities witnessed 15 years before. The children skipped in circles, singing the nursery rhyme that their parents had passed down to them. But again, there was a gap in their group. A void that was only apparent when they danced. This gap appeared to be just a little bit larger than the one before. Perhaps there was more room for the extra 2 children to join them in their playgroup. During rainy days when the children were stuck indoors playing with worn-out checker sets, there were no longer any lonely children. Every child had a partner to play with. However, laying unnoticed in the corner of the room was the solitary checker set. It had no players, no children to have fun with it. The pieces were scattered across the board as if a game was currently in progress, yet there was nobody using it. Who could say what this meant? Maybe nothing. Children are prone to strange behavior, as any parent knows. A gap in their dancing circle, an unused checkers board. Why should any of these anomalies be any concern? In the end, it did not matter. No adult noticed the slightly unusual behavior of the children after either disappearance. Such was life in the small lumber town. Years continued to pass. Those who were children during the first disappearance became middle-aged. The friends of the second child who disappeared now had children of their own, and life passed by completely normal. Until tonight. For tonight is a very special night. If one were to visit the town center, you would find it bustling with activity. Worried faces, loud arguments, and a weeping family is what you would find. You see, earlier today, a child went into the forest to play and did not return. A town meeting has been called to discuss the best course of action. Many members of the town remember the initial disappearance, which occurred more than 3 decades ago. Some are saying that the disappearances are connected, that 2 disappearances could be a coincidence, but not 3. Some now believe that the forest is haunted, while others call them crazy. Early tomorrow morning, when the sun begins to rise, a search party will set out to find the missing child. Perhaps they will find the child, and perhaps not. Perhaps the child simply became lost while playing in the forest and could not find their way back home. Or perhaps tomorrow, when the other children go outside to play and begin dancing in a circle, chanting their nursery rhyme, they will see a gap just large enough for 3 extra children to join. And so tonight I invite you to visit the Forest of 3. Early tomorrow, the determined search party will undoubtedly break the calm silence, the quiet serenity of the forest. But for the next few hours, all is still. Stroll through the tall, broad redwoods, the thick brush, and moist soil, and trickling creeks. Gaze through the foliage and the night sky to see the bright starlight and thin gray wisps of clouds flowing overhead. Eventually, you will arrive at the heart of the forest. Here stands 3 great redwoods, 100 feet taller and 100 years older than the others in the forest. They stand with their branches interwoven, as if dancing in a circle. The wind howls. The trees begin to sway. Sharp shadows are cast upon the trunks of the great redwoods. The shadows move across the bark, and it appears as if the trees are snarling at you. Sneering at some great joke that you cannot understand. The wind dies. Close your eyes. Listen for it. The soft rustle of the leaves overhead. The quiet trickle of water through streams. The small animals moving through the brush. Now it comes. So very distant, yet so very near. An innocent chorus, carrying a sinister tone. The voice of the Forest of 3. Come play in the Forest of 3. You and I with thee. Oh, such fun we have in store, lurking there forevermore.